that's just, this is the starting dish of things with Kamala Harris. Maybe we could dive into the prosecutorial records, because she was a prosecutor, I believe, before she was attorney general, right? And there were some problematic things there. What are some of the things that for you kind of rub you the wrong way the most from that?
I remember there was an article in the New York Times about a man who was either sentenced to life in prison, or I don't know if they have the death penalty in California, but I believe he was sentenced to either life in prison or an extended sentence where there
This is
was
the
all of
Cooper
this
case,
evidence
right?
that, I'm sorry?
I believe this is his last name was Cooper.
Yes, yes. And there
Yes.
was there was so much evidence that corroborated him, that basically said that he did not commit this crime, and all that was necessary was for prosecutors to consider this evidence. And while Kamala was, I believe, she was Attorney General, and they just refused to consider the evidence, right? And so this New York Times article comes out, and the reporters for the New York Times reach out to now Senator Harris, and she says, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah, somebody should do something about that." And it's like, you were the somebody. And I just have a really, there are so many, I follow a reporter named Emily Bazelon who has gone really deep into Kamala Harris's record as DA in San Francisco and as Attorney General. And it's like there are so many instances, prosecutors have lots of discretion where they just choose not to do things that could free potentially, likely, probably innocent people. I I have a problem with allowing for that kind of record. And then Kamala has now made a leftward shift. But then we are supposed to pretend like that record is not there. That really bothers me. And it also bothers me that we know she's going to use her record as a prosecutor in the general, right? Like, I just, I don't want to I don't want to give people incentives to be right and malicious and punitive for a huge chunk of their career, and then make a little shift at the end, and then all is forgiven. I feel like we've been allowing politicians, especially in the Democratic Party, to do that for too long, and I just think it's time for that to be over. But again, I just realized this is the option. So
You're
yeah,
damn, you're damn radical. Why would you want anything like that? An accountable Democratic Party? Come on.
yeah, yeah. It's sad that they've boxed us in this way. But yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah. My Kamala Harris, like, what was it, like special order, let's say, is as a thing from California. So I'm like a pretty fairly native California. I've at least adopted this place my home just as much as every transplant. And the thing she did while she was attorney general is, I'm pretty sure it was because it had ramifications throughout the entire state. Was she had a policy where she wanted to get cut down on truancy, the issue with students not showing up for classes, the early childhood development's important, etc. Things we all pretty much agree with. The result of this, though, was overly punitive because instead of looking at certain issues as to why these kids aren't coming to school, some of these kids, unfortunately, are like in poverty and they're like doing housework for the family while their like parents are working and there's like too much going on. Other kids is like there's like transportation issues, like the parents just like out of the household and like not doing good things. Like it's a complicated issue. You don't solve that problem by jailing the parents or like putting the parents through the criminal justice system where they have to deal with bail and court dates and all these other traps that get them further locked in, make it harder for them to get that job that they need for their health care if they're lucky enough to have that, so they don't fall further down into poverty and get more issues. It's like, you're, I don't get how some of the woke folks who are out there can reconcile that with Kamala Harris's record. And then again, the pattern I kind of put to attention that really makes really kind of bothers me the most is that when this is brought up, she defends what she did. She said, look, some have criticized it as being overly punitive, but overall, we solved the truancy problem. The truancy rate is better, and um, she just like I wish again you have your wishful thinking that's really logical about how the Democratic Party should be more accountable to people and how they should listen more. But I think yeah, politicians more broadly should be able to say, yeah, I messed up. There's no reason that I should have put women of color through the carceral system on my path to being the first woman of color in the White House. Like there's something within me that has to say, hey, that wasn't cool. That wasn't right. Maybe there's something I can do about all the people who are locked up for petty marijuana offenses or drug offenses instead of laughing about smoking weed on the Breakfast Club and kind of like joking about that while you have this record of people who are in prison. I mean, like, it, there's some people like Candace Owens, and like we don't need to get into that, right? But like, there's some people who like, okay, maybe you're just so detached from the Black experience, or you're so detached from knowing people whose lives have been ruined by this stuff, and like, how can you do that as a politician, as trailblazing as you are, and sort of hide in that? Again, it shows a pattern of behavior that makes me concerned about how accountable she would be were she to govern. And again, the sad thing is, I still advocate for her to govern instead. It's horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think something else that I've really had to make peace with is that there are many, many people who are supportive of Kamala Harris and the kind of punitive measures that she's taken throughout her career as a prosecutor. So there are many, many Black folks who are small c conservative, many, many people of color who are small c conservative. They might have an issue with mass incarceration, like the broad idea. But when you talk to them about arresting people because their children were truant, they're so, well, they need consequences. You can't, you got to have consequences. Or if we talk about, incarcerating people for an unduly long sentence, right? Well, you shouldn't have been committing crimes, right? So I think that is what Biden Harris, that is what they are banking on, that there are many, many people who fundamentally believe in this idea of law and order, no matter who gets harmed.
yeah. Like I I think there's a larger conversation that it almost looked like with the beginning of the George Floyd demonstrations that maybe we're about to have about there's abolish the police versus defund the police, but there's also the criminal justice system. Do we incarcerate the cops that killed Breonna Taylor, or do we rehabilitate the cops that killed Breonna Taylor? Like that's a big discussion that I think is happening within these like left of center spaces as well. I don't think it's permeating anything outside of that, honestly, throughout the rest of the culture as that we've had a couple months pass in this continuing sort of, I guess, like rekindling of the broader Black Lives Matter movement. But it doesn't seem like Kamala Harris would be the strongest ally in those things. Again, it seems like Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris. Usually a vice presidential pick is a dumb electoral strategy, like I'll pick someone from Ohio because it's a purple state and maybe I'll get it to toss because it's home court advantage. Like sometimes there's those dumb reasons. And then sometimes you think that they will be able to shield you from certain weak spots in your criticism. So like Obama picked Biden because like Obama couldn't go all in and pick like a Latina or something like that at that point in American history. It just would have like the racism would have been too much. I know it's like kind of speculating to say that, but I think we all kind of know racism would have been too much. So like picking Joe Biden, picking like, okay, this is a very standard like white male politician who's democratic, he's liked in the party. This should calm you down about the fact that I'm this like smooth talking junior senator from Chicago who's like has this interesting story and would definitely be like a color change for America more broadly on the world stage. So I understand the weird spot that a lot of these politicians have because in order to rise up into these positions, you can't go too far. You can't maybe like show all your true colors. Like there's a joke of Obama can't grow an afro in office. Like that'll freak too many people out, right? But at the same time, there are many, so many of your principles that you don't have to give up just because you're on the path to success.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like about that, I don't know, right? Like people have said to me in defense of Kamala Harris, we are in now a landscape where progressive Black women, progressive women of color, like a Cori Bush, like an Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib or an AOC, where they are able to win election with those leftist politics. But Kamala Harris has been doing this for a long time, a couple of decades, and that was not true 2 decades ago. Like I'm willing to concede that, right? Like that she has done what she needed to do to get to where she is. I'm not sure if I, this is again hard, right? Because I understand the reality of what it means to be a Black woman. I understand that just by being a woman or being a person of color, people view you as more left than you are. There's lots of data around that. Conservatives viewed Barack Obama as like a radical leftist when in reality he was very much a centrist, sometimes center right? Because our bodies are just seen as radical. I get it. I understand. There's just things that, is it worth it, right? Like is furthering your career worth sacrificing the lives of so many incarcerated people? Like I don't know. It's hard.
It's really hard, and like not everyone makes the right decision in life, but if you're going to run for office, we get to talk about those decisions. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's why I want to have you on, because you have the duality of like being further to the left of Kamala Harris, but also you have the understanding of like being a Black woman, that there are a lot of people on the internet that like criticize Kamala Harris, and sometimes they go too far, or they misstep in certain ways, or they use certain like tropes, or they buy into almost just as racist terminology that it was like the right is using. And so like it's a delicate space to walk because of the time we're in. Like this is really Nina Turner said something about like being served a plate of shit, and like that was a really strong kind of like turn of phrase to this. But like this is the worst of worst situations. We are really picking the lesser of two evils, and there's like no equivocating with like how this time the choice is so stark and so valid.